Okay. All right, so you have to continue getting ready for Pesach. Yeah, so the truth is, the title for the shir tonight, I think, was Pesach, the Yontif of celebrating mistakes. I think that's what it was. So, if you're very, very creative, when we learn, you'll be able to figure out how it fits with the title. The truth is, it doesn't. It's like a last minute decision. I had to give a different shir. So, if it doesn't seem to fit, you're not crazy. So I decided to talk about tonight is similar to, just like last week we took a little prat, a certain aspect of Pesach night. Last week it was Charoises, and used that as sort of a window to talk about all of Pesach B'chlal. So I want to do something similar tonight by focusing on a different aspect of the Seder. Also, I can't say it's ignored. It's not seen as sort of just a secondary thing like Charoises, but it's still not necessarily highlighted too much. And that's Kais Shalio, the Kais Shalio. So let's investigate a little bit in halacha what the inyan of Kais Shalio is, and from there we'll be able to see hopefully what the Pneumius says, where it comes from. Okay, so a little bit of halacha what Kais Shalio is. Now again, as we know, right from the Gemara, the Mishnah tells us in Pesachim that Chazal instituted that a person has to drink and experience the Daled of 4 cups of wine. Right, so you have the first cup is on Kiddush, the second one on Haggadah, the third on benching, and the fourth on Halal. That's the Daled. Again, as we know, Keneged corresponding to the 4 languages of Geula, other Ramazim in Chazal as well. That's well known. Then we have this 5th cup that we pour. We don't drink it, but we pour a 5th cup we call Kais Shalio. Where is that coming from? So Marmuk number 1. So there's one of the early Achrayim, Poskim, Chayk Yaakov, the Sefer Chayk Yaakov. There's others that bring this down as well, but he's one of the earlier Achrayim that records such a minig. The Noyagin Be'elu HaMedinas, the minig is amongst these countries. I think at this point, again, Pesach is one of those Yom Tovim that it's hard to say this is what everyone does, because most of the time you only know your Seder. So it's like anything else is foreign to you. So I don't know 100% what's foreign to do, but I think Kais Shalio is a minig that everyone does. But Noigin Be'elu HaMedinas, he says that the minig is in these countries by Ashkenaz, Limzai Kais Echad Yaiser Mihamasubin, to pour another cup besides the one that everyone has for the Daled Kaisis, an extra cup on the table. The Karnaisa Kais Shalio Navi, we call it Kais Shalio. That's what it's called. Where is this coming from? Why? So Marmuk number 2, the Mishnah Berurah quotes again from earlier sources, the Rames, that the point of Kais Shalio is to be Rames, is to hint to us, is to give a remez. Shanu Ma'aminin, that we believe, Shekashem Shagalnu Hashem Yitzrach Mitzrayim, that just as the Rebbeinu Shalom took us out of Mitzrayim, Hu Yigalenu Oy, that He'll also take us out again. V'yishlach Lanu Esel Yonavi, Lavasreinu, He'll send El Yonavi to Mevasa B'Suras Tovis, to herald in the coming of Mashiach. That's the Kais Shalio. Now this is part of a major theme when it comes to Pesach, that it's a unique yontif where, like all Yom Tovim, like all other Yom Tovim, it's all about connecting us to an experience of the past. Yitzias Mitzrayim. But there's something unique with Pesach, and you sort of feel at Pesach night that it's clearly not just about a Geula that took place, thousands of years ago, that we're reconnecting to, certainly, but there's something about Pesach that it's also connected to a future Geula. And that's certainly highlighted with Kais Shalio. B'chlal, the Vilna Gaon talks about this. It's a major theme in the Pirush of his Haggadah, how these are the 2 aspects that's going on in Pesach. One, connecting to a Geula of the past, and number 2, a Geula of the future. That's Kais Shalio. That's the simple shot. Now, according to this, there's no real halachic significance to Kais Shalio. It's nothing more than a minig that came up, stam to be mechazik our emunah, and to show that we believe in the coming of Mashiach. Okay, it's a nice thing, but it doesn't seem to be very halachic. So let's suggest, and some Achrayim do, to suggest a more halachic explanation of what Kais Shalio is. Then we'll see in the Pneumius all these things Be'ez Hashem coming together. Okay, so I mentioned before that there are 4 cups, and the 4th cup is what we say Halal, right? That's Halal. So if you take a look at Marmuk number 3, that's in fact the Mishnah in Maseches Pesachim, Kuf Yechesem and Aleph. The Mishnah says, Revi, it's going through each one of the cups, what we say on each cup. Revi, the Mishnah says on the 4th cup, Gaimer always a Halal. We finish the Halal, right? Because the first half of Halal you said at the end of the Haggadah. So the completion of Halal you say on the 4th cup. after Shleich HaMascha. V'aymer halagadol, and also you say halagadol. Halagadol is, Hoyle Hashem Kitab Chazda, Nishmas, the whole thing all the way till the end of Yishtabach, the end of Hal. So you say all of that on the fourth cup. That's our minig. That's our girsa. That's our version of what it says in Pesach. But our mark number 4, the Rif, Ben Yitzchak Alfasi, one of the early Rishonim, Sephardic Rishonim. I mean, not really from Sfar. He was from North Africa, but from the beginning of that Shalshelas of Sephardic Rishonim. So he had a different girsa, a different version of the Mishnah. And in the Rif, he introduces us to this idea halachically of a fifth cup. Says the Rif, Revi Gaimer Al V'Sahal. So far, that's like our Mishnah. The fourth cup, you finish Halal. Again, you started by Haggadah, by Magid. You finish up on the fourth cup. Chamishi, and on the fifth cup, Gaimer Al V'Hal Haggadah. On the fifth cup, that's what you say. You say upon the fifth cup, Hoyle Hashem Kitab Chazda Nishmas, what we call Hal Haggadah, on the fifth cup. Okay, that's the gears of the Rif. That's how the Mishnah read, according to the Rif. Now, the Rishonim that quote the Rif, that deal with this Rif, are mamish bothered by it, because this is like the only place in all of Pesach Pesachim that there's any reference to a fifth cup. And the Mishnah is like saying it as if it's like a simple thing. There's 4 cups and there's a fifth cup that you say Hal Haggadah on. And so Rishonim try to deal with this, because we know the classic halach is that there's 4 cups. How do we now reconfigure our way of thinking that there's 5 cups? Throughout Chazal, throughout the Gemara, it's always a discussion of 4 cups. So how do we make sense of this? Okay. So Marmukah number 5, the Ran, Nisan, one of the Rishonim, against Sephardic Rishonim on the Rif. So he deals with this. Again, he raises the point that according to the Rif, we have this new concept of there being a fifth cup. Yet we know that every kid knows there's 4 cups. There's 4 cups of Pesach. So, and you're not allowed to drink after the 4th cup. So like, well, what's going on? So the Ran says like this: the Dalet Kaisa is chayva. So you have to say that even according to the Rif, the 5th cup is different than the 4th. How so? The 4th cup. So the Ran gives 2 possible suggestions, because the Rif does say there's a 5th cup of wine that you say Hal Haggadah on, which means that you're drinking 5 cups, right? 4th cup is for the regular halal, and the 5th cup is Hal Haggadah. So how does that work? So it says there are 2 suggestions. First of all, suggestion number 1, Dalet Kaisa is chayva. Maybe when we always talk about 4 cups, that's because the 4 cups are mamish achiv, an obligation. Everyone has to drink the 4 cups of wine. The chamishi, this 5th cup that the Rif is introducing to us, it's true that you have to drink the 5th cup, that you drink the 5th cup, but rishus, but you don't have to. It's not an obligation. It's rishus. If you want to, then this is something that's a nice thing to do. If you're still thirsty, if you still want to drink another cup of wine or grape juice, so you can just say Hal Haggadah on it. That's one possibility. Inami, or another possibility, a little bit of a similar angle though. That again, the 4 cups are the obligation. You have to, no matter what. And the 5th cup, either it's voluntary or it's it's a mitzvah hamuvchar, it's lechatchila to do such a thing. That's how the Ran is sort of trying to figure this out. That we still have the 4 cups as being the main obligation, and the 5th cup is sort of this extra credit bonus if you want to do it. You don't have to, but if you want, it's a nice thing to do. That's the Ran is suggesting. So Lishas Kais Chamishi, and you say Hal Haggadah. So that's the Mahalach of the Ran. Okay. So what the Ran is the way the Ran is dealing with the 5th cup is that the approach he's going with is that fundamentally the 4 cups and the 5th cup are similar. In terms of that, just as the 4 cups, there are things that you say upon that cup, and then you drink it. So that's the same process with the 5th cup. You're saying Hal Haggadah, and you drink it. And so then the question that the Ran is dealing with was, I thought there's only 4 cups. Now you're telling me there's a 5th cup. So then he's trying to finagle his way. Okay, 4 cups are obligation, and the 5th cup is only voluntary or extra credit, something like that. But fundamentally, the process of how we deal with the 5th cup is the same as we deal with the first 4. And the dividing line between them is obligation versus voluntary. That's the way the Ran is dealing with the issue. But the Rambam seems to be different. The Rambam, generally speaking, there's only a handful of cases not like this, but B'derech Klal, generally speaking, the Rambam always goes with the Rif. And very often we have Rambams that are difficult to understand, and it's based on the Rif. That's usually how it goes. There's a famous letter of the Rambam, in fact, in Shuvas the Rambam, where he lists, and he goes out of his way to list, I think maybe five examples, 5 cases where he disagrees with the Rif. And so that's a major tshuva, because that means that everywhere else besides that 5, he's always going with the Rif, which creates problems in its own right, because there seems to be other cases that he doesn't agree with the Rif. But you definitely see the Rambam always goes with the Rif. Now what's interesting is that the Rambam, because of the version of the Rif, the Rambam also records this idea of having a 5th cup. But the way the Rambam records it and brings it down, you see that he looked at the 5th cup fundamentally as differently than the Ran did. What does the Rambam say? So when the Rambam, a little bit of background, when the Rambam talks about the 4 cups, he says what we all familiar with, which is that cup number 1, you say Kiddush and you drink it. Cup number 2, you say the Haggadah and you drink it. Cup 3, you bench upon it and you drink it. The 4th cup, you say Hal, you finish Hal and you drink it. So every single one of the 4 cups, the Rambam says, there are things that you say and then you drink. But when it comes to the 5th cup, based on the Rif, this is all the Rambam says. V'yesh lo limzai kekais chamishi, you should pour a 5th cup, v'loimer olav halagadol, and say upon it halagadol, right? Ha'ilashon kitayv and nishmas. The Rambam doesn't say and drink it. Okay. Now the Rambam does say that when it comes to the first 4. What's clear in the Rambam is that, again, he was bothered with the same question which the Ran is. You're telling me about a 5th cup. All my life, I grew up, there's only 4 cups. So what's going on with this 5th cup? With the way so the way the Ran dealt with it is that, yeah, I guess there's 5 cups, but the first 4 are obligatory, and the 5th one is only voluntary. But the Rambam dealt with it in a different way. The Rambam deals with it is that the dividing line between the first 4 and the final 5th cup is not just obligation versus voluntary. All 5 cups are obligation. The dividing line, what makes the 4 cups unique, is that not only are you speaking and you're saying something in each cup, you have an obligation to drink the 4 cups. The 4 cups are the cups that you have to drink. The 5th cup is different. The 5th cup is a cup that you have to speak upon it. You have to say halagadol on it. But nowhere does it say that you have to drink the 5th cup. And that's the chiddush of what the Rambam is doing to us. Is what the Rambam is telling us is that there is a fundamental difference between the first 4 cups and the 5th cup. They're all obligation. Not like they're all obligation. But when we always grew up with this understanding that there's 4 cups of wine corresponding to 4 languages of Gula and all that stuff, what makes those 4 cups different is that those are cups that you not only have an amira, there's not only a bracha that's set upon them, but you also have an obligation to drink those 4 cups. The 5th cup is different, that all that we have on the 5th cup is an obligation to say, an obligation to speak. That's the Rambam. Now because of this, based on this understanding of the Rambam, let's give an example. Let's say you have 10 people at the table. If every single person, let's say by Kiddush, right, by Pesach night, so every single person has a cup in front of them. Why? Why is it not enough? Why isn't it enough for there to just be 1 cup on the table and everyone is saying Kiddush together? 1 cup on the table and everyone says Haggadah together. And everyone's Haggadah is going to be sort of said on that particular cup. Why don't we do that? Well, the answer is because besides saying it on a cup, you also have to drink. So everyone has to have their own cup in order to drink it. But let's say you were to have a certain cup that all you have to do is say upon it. You don't have to drink it at all. So then you're right. Why waste wine? Why waste grape juice? Have 1 cup in the middle of the table, and everyone is saying halagadol, and it's all on that cup. And then you're fulfilling the obligation of the 5th cup. Because according to the Ram, you don't have to drink it anyway. So there's no purpose of having everyone. It's not like there's a halacha that the cup has to be within, 6 inches of your plate. There's a cup at the table. Everyone's speaking upon it. That's called saying halagadol on a cup. Because if that's true, then when we talk about the minhag that we have of what we call kaishel yo, that you have a cup middle of the table that's poured, and everyone says halal and halagadol and so on by their seat. So according to the Rambam, one can very much suggest, and it seems to be very clear, that kaishel yo is not just stam a nice remes to mechazik our emunah in the coming of Mashiach. There's a halachic significance to that cup. Why? Because the cup that you have in front of you that you're holding, that's the 4th cup of wine that you have to say halal on, and that's the cup that you're drinking. But according to the girsa of the Rif, and the Rambam goes with that girsa, the halacha is that hal hagadol, nishmas, and hoyd Lashem kitayv, the whole thing, needs a 5th cup. But that 5th cup you don't have to drink. So what you do is very simple. You have a cup in front of you, which is your 4th cup, and that's the cup that you're officially saying halal on, and that's the cup that you're eventually going to drink after everything is said and done. But besides that fourth cup, there's a fifth cup that you're saying halal gadol on. But that fifth cup, no one has to drink. So let it just be one cup for everyone. There's no reason to waste more wine and more grape juice. So that's the halacha significance of a week. Now we call it kais shel, but the truth is, according to the Rambam, you could call it kais chamishi or kais halal gadol. But that's the halacha significance of kais shel. Okay, that's the simple pshat of what's going on. So now we have so what comes out is, halachically speaking, two separate ideas of what's going on with kais shel. Number one, no real halacha significance. It's just another way of celebrating and bringing out the fact that we mamish believe in the coming Mashiach, so we call it kais shel. Okay, and then we have this other approach based on the Rambam, which says no, it's the fifth cup of wine. It's the fifth cup of wine. Happens to be the fifth cup, which you have to say halal gadol on. You don't have to drink. So memela, it's very simple. Just have one cup, and everyone is saying halal gadol on the same cup. Right? There's no reason. It's not like it's not like the cup has to. It's for his halal as opposed to his halal. Everyone could say it together on the same cup of wine. Okay, that's the concept. Okay, so the question is, fine, as I've mentioned many times, in Nigla things are divided up, things can be disjointed, but in Pnimius, what's really going on behind the scenes of Yiddishkeit, everything is always a matter of unity. It's all about unity. So the question is, what is the Pnimius of this inyan of the Kais Chamishi, of Kais shel, and in what way does it bring all these different sides together? Okay. So now let's talk about Bechlal, Pesach, Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we're going to learn some Rav Tzadok tonight. Okay, for the next two Marakamis are from Rav Tzadok. So there's a principle by Rav Tzadok, a kind of Lublin, that he always says like this. The way the Rebbeinu Shalom, we're used to the concept of the Rebbeinu Shalom always, running our lives mida keneged mida. But mida keneged mida, that's a language that Chazal use, but the way we think of it is a little bit underdeveloped. Mida keneged mida, we always think of it's like reactive. We do something down here and the Rebbeinu Shalom reacts. That's certainly true. But there's a deeper side to mida keneged mida, which is that any particular tsar, any particular difficulty that a Jew or the Jewish people are going through, that's the beginning. That's the flip side. This is the flip side of the Yeshua itself. The Yeshua and the Tsar always have to be related to each other. In other words, like the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's not just like Tsaris, the Rebbeinu Shalom divvies out. He just has this Rolodex of difficulties. He's going through the different possibilities, what our ancestors had to go through with Mitzrayim, and it just happened to land on Avdus. Okay, so that's what happens. It's not like that. If the Tsar, whatever the Tsar is, that's always reflective of what the Rebbeinu Shalom has in store for us in terms of the Yeshua. They always parallel each other. So Tzaddik in Marmakot number 7 in Sefer Arzul Tzaddik is talking about what is it about. What is the fact that Golus Mitzrayim was the way it was in terms of the slavery and the death that was the murders that was going on by the Jewish people, the decrees against the boys. What does that tell us about Yetzias Mitzrayim? What does it tell us about Yetzias Mitzrayim? So Tzaddik says like this: L'kach Mitzrayim shayachon l'matan Torah. So we all know, it's a famous thing, everyone knows, that Pesach is not just a yontif by itself. Ultimately, the completion of Pesach is with Shavuos by Kabbalah Satar, right? That's why everyone knows that Shavuos is the only yontif that it doesn't have a date to it, right? Pesach is the 15th of Nisan, right? Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei. Yom Kippur, Purim, Chanukah, every yontif has its date. When is Shavuos? It happens to be in our calendar. It's the 6th of Sivan. It doesn't have to be, right? Shavuos is 50 days after Pesach, 50 days after the second day of Pesach, right? That's when Shavuos is. Chazal tell us at the time when there was Kiddush HaChodesh based on Eidos, so Shavuos could be the 5th of Sivan, it could be the 7th of Sivan. It depends on when Rosh Chodesh was established. Why doesn't Shavuos have its own identity? Why doesn't it have its own date? The answer is because it's not its own yontif. It's the completion. It's the Gemara of Pesach. Right? In Midrashim, many places in Chazal, Shavuos is called Atzeres Shel Pesach. It's called like the second days. It's called like a Shmini Atzeres of Pesach. Now that tells us what Pesach is about. The purpose of Pesach, as we know, Klal Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim, coming into Cheres, was about ultimately us receiving the Torah in Har Sinai. That's well known. Okay. But the way Ratzalik spins it is unique. So he says like this. Again, L'kach Mitzrayim shayachel man Torah. So Mitzrayim, the Exodus, was preparing us for Har Sinai. Shu kinyan hachayim. And what happens by Har Sinai? So it's interesting. What happens by Har Sinai? We got the Torah. It says Ratzalik, it's not just we got the Torah, now we got direction, we have meaning in life. That's life itself, right? Eitz chayim l'machzikim bo. The Torah itself is life. The Torah is life. It's chiyutz. It's vekus with the Rebbeinu Shloim. It's absolute unity with the divine. It's transcendence. It's life itself. Atem adveikim Hashem Elokeichem chayim kulchem hayom. Without Har Sinai and without Pesach, which is the leading to Har Sinai, then we are not attached to God. And if you're not attached to God, you're not alive. Which means that if we really want to define what really was given to us on Pesach, and again, and it becomes fully blossomed and developed on Shavuos, but what was truly given to the Jewish people on Pesach was life. That's what was given to us. Therefore, since the exodus of Mitzrayim really means us being given Chayim, Hayhagzer Shalem Heder Chayim. Therefore, the flip side, the decree, the Golus of Mitzrayim was the opposite of that. Because again, the Golus always is reflective of the opposite of the Gula, making sort of an empty space to allow that Gula to come. And so if the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to give us life, the Golus that's preceding that is going to be highlighting the fact that we don't have life. The fact that we don't have life. And that's why there was such, the Xeris of Parai to destroy the Jewish people, both individually, with terms of killing the babies, and on a national level, the Jewish people as a people were being destroyed. Their identity as a people were being destroyed. So much so the Pasuk describes Yitzis Mitzrayim as Goy Mikerev Goy, a nation that's coming out of another nation. On some level, the Jewish people no longer existed. Before Mitzrayim, there was a family, they had their own Mitzias. They come to Mitzrayim, they become completely absorbed and enmeshed in the nation of Mitzrayim to the point of where the very life of the Jewish people was no longer in existence on some level. And that's all reflective of the Geula. So the Geula of Pesach is really about giving us life. Now, that's Mitzrayim. The Shar Golias, what about the Golias that we're in now? And the truth is, on some level, all exiles since Mitzrayim. Shachana mehem. So again, you want to have, what is the purpose? What is all future Golias and leading towards? What's the ultimate Geula? So Bias Mashiach. And what is Mashiach about? If once we already were given life by Pesach, which can't be taken away from us, Cher Asylum, so what's missing then? Shemachavim boys, it says the ultimate purpose of Mashiach is what? Not to give us life, that we already have. But now he quotes a few psukim. The pasuk tells us, Sheyeshu ish tachas gafnoi, v'ish tachas teinasai. The purpose of Mashiach is not to give us life, but to give us peace. To give us a peaceful life, to give us a life of menucha, of yishuv adas, where the pasuk describes everyone sitting under their orchard, under their fig tree. Kamei shenemar, as the pasuk says, when a tativ, I will plant the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael with the coming of Mashiach. V'shachin tachtav, they'll be able to reside under their in Eretz Yisrael. V'layir gazayd, they won't be in a state of anger. Roiges in Chazal and Tanakh, it translated as anger. It doesn't mean to be angry necessarily. It means to be agitated. They won't be agitated. And no foreign entity will cause them any more affliction and pain. Kasher Rishayna, as it was in the earlier times. In other words, what the pasuk is telling us about the coming of Mashiach is Shiel Hemakim Kavua, that the Jewish people will finally, on a national level, be able to have a permanent place to live. V'deim Yusheves, and what that means on an individual level and also on a national level is to finally have Yishuv Hadas. So life was given to us by Mitzrayim, but you could be alive, but your life is a life of tsar. A person can have, Rachman Latzan, a life of Bilbul Hadas, of Tiruf HaNefesh, of Pizar HaNefesh, of where just as the Jewish people during Galus are what? We're alive, but we're being forced to move from place to place, where you're not able to settle and to just be b'menucha. That's true on a collective level, and that's true on an individual level. The diaspora, the Golas, the Pizar, Bein Ha'umas, Bein Ha'amim, that exists within the individual means that even when you have a person, the nature of Golas is that you're all over the place, is that your head is all over the place, that there's no yichud, there's no shalom within the person himself. There's no shalom amongst Yidden, right? And there's no shalom within the person himself, and that's all reflective of what's coming with the coming of Mashiach, which is the opposite of that, which is Shalom and Shalva on a national level, sitting in one place in a state of cohesion, and individually to have what's called Yishuv Adas. Now, it's an amazing thing because we don't necessarily think of Mashiach in those terms, but Rav Tzadok is telling us that the definition of the coming of Mashiach is Yishuv Adas, is to have that state of inner peace. And Shezel HaMachavim Mashiach, that's the tachlis of Mashiach. K'may Shomer Chazal, as Chazal say, that what is Eliyahu Navi going to do? Eliyahu that heralds the Mashiach. Sheyavi Lasis Sholem Ba'aretz. Eliyahu Navi is going to come, as the Mishnah says over there, not to push people away or to bring people close, not to change anything. What Eliyahu Navi is going to come and to bring what? And the sentence that he says to tell the whole world Mashiach is coming is Ba Shalom, peace has come to the world. Peace does not only mean that there's no wars anymore. Peace means within the person that there's a hiskansus, there's an ingathering within the person instead of being pulled in a million directions and having a hard time focusing on anything and knowing what you're doing and know what life is about. Having that hiskansus, that yichud, that shalom within oneself. Shechai oilam kfar yeshlan, says Rav Tzadok. Life we already had. Rakshi b'naicha. That life should be in a state of menucha. That's ultimately what Mashiach is coming for. V'hainu. Rav Tzadok explains more. Kiyesh madreges ben ve'ever. We know in Chazal that our relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom is often described as either a son or a servant. Shanachnu amei yisbarach. Therefore says Rav Tzadok, if you want to be magdir like this, when it comes to the definition of the Jewish people as Hashem's servant, as Hashem's nation, right, of servants, zel mitzad matan Torah, that already took place through Pesach and Shavuos. The Kabbalas elokusai v'adnusai u'malchusai, by the Jewish people accepting upon ourselves Hashem's malchus, right? And because of that, just like Hashem's kingdom is forever, so too our existence, we now have life. You know, says Rav Tzadok, why? In what way were the Jewish people zeicha to such a thing that we are given life and life will never be taken away from us on a collective level? Why? Is because we established ourselves by Pesach and Shavuos to be the nation of Hashem, the malchus of Hashem, the kingdom of Hashem. And if, God forbid, the Jewish people go away, that means the kingdom is gone. And the Rebbeinu Shalom, that would be a pagam, that would be something, God forbid, a deficiency in the king himself. So that's not possible. So the kingdom is established, and that's finished. So in terms of the Jewish people being an am, an eved of the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's taken care of with Pesach. Avol toyar ben, but a ben is something else. Because you could have an eved who's officially part of the malchus, but he has no menucha in the malchus. He has no yishuv das at all, right? And he doesn't even find that he doesn't even feel like he has a place. But a son, the definition of a son is, of course he has a place. He's the Yairish. He yarshes everything. Everything is technically owned by him. Wherever he is where he's supposed to be ultimately. So Avotoyer ben ze yilase. That's going to be when Mashiach comes. Shia ben naicha. She'enin golus hu hepach madreges ben. And we find this in Chazal that golus is described as the opposite of what a child should be experiencing. As the Gemara says in the beginning of Brachas, that the Gemara says, whenever the Jewish people say Yehesh Mirab in Shul, what does Hashem respond? Hashem says, Ma la'av shehiglas banav. Hashem says, woe is to a father that sent his son into exile. Now, as the Rebbeinu Shalom describes Golus, in describing how irrational even Golus is, and how terrible Golus is that someone who's a son isn't by his father's table sent into Golus like that. So you see, the Rebbeinu Shalom is describing Golus as something that's unbecoming to the son of the king. Is it unbecoming to the servant of the king? Not Dafka. The king could send his servant to exile, but for the son, that's already unbecoming. And so this is how Rav Tzadok is doing it. So Rav Tzadok is telling us that the definition of Golus Mitzrayim, of Gulas Mitzrayim, is all revolving around being alive and having that sense of attachment to God. But then already you're talking about the coming of Mashiach, and the Golus preceding it is not revolving around life, it's revolving around Yishuv Adas and Menuchas HaNefesh, which ultimately is the definition and the quality that's most becoming and deserving of a son of the king. Not Lavdavka, the servant of the king. The servant of the king can't necessarily demand Yishuv Adas and Menucha, but a son could demand such a thing. So when we talk about, let's go back to what we're talking about, Kosh Elyo. So, the word Elyo, right? The word Elyo equals b'gematria the word Ben. Elyo Navi, as we said, is the one that heralds in the coming of Mashiach, and he proclaims what? Ba Shalom La'olam. So now let's begin to redefine, based on what we just saw from Rav Tzadok, what Gula means and what Koshel Yo means. Again, Koshel Yo is a cup that we like we started in the beginning. The simple pshat of Koshel Yo is a cup that we have in the middle of the Seder table in order to proclaim our emunah that Mashiach Be'ez Hashem will come. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, eventually take us out of this galus. And what does that mean to come out of this galus? It means that we'll finally be in a state not to be alive, not to exist. That's guaranteed already. The chiddush of Geula is Ba'ashon L'Olam, that there will be a state of an ingathering, that there will be a state of achdus within the nefesh, a place of Yishuv Das, a bechina where we'll be able to embrace the right of a ben, the right of a son. An Evid's rights don't guarantee Yishuv Das and Menucha, but the right of the son is able to demand of the father that we have the right for Yishuv Das. And so Koshel Yo is an expression of that faith, that not only do we have life, but we believe in our guarantee that Be'ez Hashem will have a life of Menucha, of Yishuv Das, the life of the son. Because of this, the halacha of Koshel Yo, as it is in the view of the Rambam, is reflective of this. The halacha of the Koshel Yo, as we saw for the Rambam, is it's something that you have to say halagadol on. But because the halacha is that you don't have to drink it, so that creates a very unique opportunity where you can have one cup middle of the table and every single person is sharing and coming together and expressing in a deep achdus, in a deep shalom, because they're all literally using the same cup. You can't do that with the first four. Why? Because the first four cups you have to drink. And because you have to drink them, that means automatically everyone's going to have their own. But all of a sudden when it comes to the fifth cup, where that halacha doesn't apply, you don't have to drink it. Right? And so now you have the opportunity for everyone to literally come together and say the same halagadol on the same cup. That shalom, that achdus, that yichud, is reflective of what the Koshel Yo is about, which is the cup talking about Geula. Even though, again, if you isolate the Rambam's view, there's no remez to Geula in that. It's just halagadol. But now that Reb Tzadok tells us that the whole inyan of Geula is to be in a state of shalom, that's what Eliyahu Navi is coming to bring to the world. That's the definition of Mashiach, is a state of shalom. Then the fact that Koshel Yo is a kais which expresses that sense of shalom between everyone at the table. Then until now, everyone had their own cup and their own haggadah, and everyone's at their own pace and doing their own thing and yelling at the Baal HaSeder or thinking that maybe if not verbally yelling, they're thinking, "Come on, hurry up!" or going too fast, going too slow, whatever it is, and everyone's sort of like doing their own thing. All of a sudden, Koshel Yo, everyone automatically is mechuber, is mekush at that place. That's reflective not only of the collective shalom that's going to come with the coming Mashiach, but individually as well. That's that sense of inner kinos, of that inner unity, the opposite of the pizer nefesh, right? The opposite of pizer nefesh, of that tir fadas, that inner angst and frustration and nervousness and Pizer Nefesh, that is the essence of Golus. The Koshel Yo is the embodiment of the Metzias of Ben. And that Metzias of Ben means Yishuv Das Menuchas Nefesh. That's what it means to be a Ben. So that's what Tzaddik is telling us, that the definition of Eved and Ben, it's the Ben means to be in a state of Yishuv Das Menuchas Nefesh. And if you're not in a state of Yishuv Das Menuchas Nefesh, there's a taina that you have on the Father. Why am I not in that state? So that's what Koshel Yo means. So Koshel Yo is reflective of that. But one last thing we have to now clarify. So until now, okay, so those are two separate inyanim. So we're given life by Pesach, and that means we're established as an Eved, established as a servant to the king. Lav dafka, is there any guarantee in that way of being an Eved of ever coming to a place of Menucha? And then there's something else that we believe in the coming of Mashiach. Eliyahu Navi, Mashiach Ben, is going to herald in shalom, herald in peace, bring us to a state of achdus within each other, within ourselves. That's Koshel Yo. It's very nice, but still disjointed. Still disjointed. It's like two Yom Tovim happening at the same time. There's a Yom Tov celebrating the life of the Jewish people given to us, and there's a promise and a hope and a celebration of what's going to come in the future. But now we have this final piece from our tzaddik in Sefer Divrei Seifrim, Vav, where our tzaddik over here brings it together, these two bechinas. Although before we had Eved and Ben, two separate things, you could have one, and you could be an Eved, and there's no guarantee that you'll be a Ben. But Tzaddik over here explains the following. It's a huge chiddush. But he says like this: Ein nikra chayim ela keshuba menucha. Says Tzaddik, the truth is though by the very fact, the definition of life, says Tzaddik, the definition of life is not just to be alive. The definition of life is life in a state of peace. And if a person is alive not in a state of peace, the emes he's not considered to be alive. The emes alive. Shemargish b'chaim. Only when a person is able to be margish, he's in a state where he can sense his life and he could feel, there's enough yeshiva das that he can sense the fact, he could appreciate what life is. V'loi bal yisur, not, however, a person that's suffering, a person that's going through tsaras and difficulty in the state of peace or in the state of galus, in such a way, hashar b'tzar, such an existence, although it looks like he's alive and all the signs of life are there, that's not really called being alive. And he quotes the Gemara Pesach, the Gemara says, Gimel Chayim Enam Chayim. The Gemara says mefurish that there are three people that they're alive, but they're not really considered to be alive. And each one, again, for each reason, each example by itself, is the person is in a state of the opposite of menucha. He doesn't have that state of yeshiva das. Now Ritzadik explains, the ein hakavana b'shalva gufanis levad. What do I mean that it's not called being alive unless a person is in a state of menucha? So it says Ritzadik, I don't mean only physical menucha and physical pleasure and physical peace, ulasanik b'chendes olam and just time to enjoy this world. The zavadi enachayim, that's for sure by itself insignificant. V'lidibur tar b'mesim. The Rosh is not even, we're not. Chazal say that a person that's a Rasha that's only focused on olam hazeh, he's called dead in this world, right? They nikrachai el hadavik b'Hashem yisbarach. Again, as we said in the beginning, Pesach Shavuos is a time where the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us life, and what defines life? What defines life is Atem Adveikim Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kolchem Hayon. But here it says Ritzadik, here's the chiddush. That reality of Atem Hadveikim Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kolchem Hayon, in order for that to be truly fulfilled, the Rebbeinu Shalom has then you have to be in a matziv of Yeshiva Das in order to experience that Chaim that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you. In other words, it says Ritzadik, the definition of life, it's true that life be'etzem means Vegas. But what significance is there for the Rebbeinu Shalom to give you attachment if you don't feel the attachment, if you don't sense the attachment, if you're too pulled in a million directions to appreciate what it means to be attached? From the Rebbeinu Shalom side of things, the reason why he's giving out life, the reason why he's giving us Chaim, is because he wants us to experience that. Just sound that we should be alive, what does he gain from that? The Rebbeinu Shalom Kiviyachol gains is that now he created a world where there's creatures and there's beings that experience life. That's what he wanted. Which means that there's really no purpose ultimately in the Rebbeinu Shalom just creating avadim, in the Rebbeinu Shalom just giving people life, but the life that they're living are Chai Tzar and Chai Pizar and Chai Tiruf, where they're all in a million places and they can't appreciate and experience what it means to be alive and what the purpose of life is and the Simchas HaChaim. If the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us life, obviously it means there's a certain level of expectation that you should have that you'll be able to eventually come to a place of menucha, because otherwise what's the tachlis? Why would the Rebbeinu Shalom just give you life and you're never in a state of in a mindset we'll be able to appreciate it? So a guy's given life, but he's always Rahman San will be sick and all problems with Bani Chaim is Zaini. So the guy's never able to appreciate it. So his whole life, all he thinks about when he thinks of life is the mission that says Bal Korcha Chatachai. So against your will, you're alive. Against the Shkayach. What does Rebbeinu Shalom gain by giving a person an existence where every single moment he's begrudgingly accepting life? So the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't gain anything from that. So what Tzaddik is telling us is the following thing, is that, yes, from our perspective, if you just sort of isolate the gifts, yeah, you could sort of separate the two. There's something that's called being alive. Technically, you're attached to God. It's Gavaldik, a thing. Now you have Torah, you can keep mitzvahs, it's Gavaldik. And then there's something else, which is called, do you appreciate life? Are you in a state of Yeshiva Das in your life in terms of everything of physical things, Bani Chaim Zaini, to allow yourself to appreciate the gift that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you? So theoretically, those are two separate things. You could have one without the other. The Rebbeinu Shalom could give you life. You could have life, but lav dafka, will you ever be in a state to appreciate that? But it says it's like, but if you think about what God gets out, what does God get out of that? From the Rebbeinu Shalom's perspective, of course, when He's giving you life, it means that at some point it's going to come with the guarantee for you to be able to appreciate it. Because otherwise, why would He do this? So says Ritzadik, therefore, in this context, from a deeper perspective, if we think about what the Rebbeinu Shalom, why would he have this entire system in place? From the Rebbeinu Shalom side of things, whenever he gives you life, of course, at some point, it's guaranteed that you'll be able to live a life of menucha. Therefore, the whole Yontif of Pesach, let's understand, the Yontif of Pesach is unique, that the Yontif of Pesach is a Yontif which was completely from God's side of things. Every Yontif, for the most part, it came from our Avodah. It came from our Avodah. So even Shavuos, there's 50 days to lead up to Shavuos, Klais, we're working on ourselves, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and so on. When it comes to Pesach, as we know from the Svarim, it was all Isrus Delayim. We were in the Memta Shari Toma, right? We didn't deserve anything. And even from the beginning, the Rebbeinu Shalom promised to put us in Mitzrayim and promised to take us out. So the whole thing was motivated from God's side of things, which means that the Yontif of Pesach gives us the opportunity to allow ourselves the right to view our lives from God's perspective. What do I mean from God's perspective? To not just be thankful with the life that we have, but to think about why would the Rebbeinu Shalom give us life? What does he gain from this? Well, if the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us life, what he gains is what? Is not just the fact that people that something's alive. What does he gain from that? The answer is the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world in order to be meitiv, in order to have a world that is able to enjoy the benefits of existence. That's why the Rebbeinu Shalom did this. Which means that on Pesach, since everything that's Pesach is coming from God's, it's all about his motivation. So now we're allowed to think in terms of the creation of what the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us on Pesach. What is his motivation? What is the Rebbeinu Shalom? What does he want? Why is it that he gave us life on Pesach? The answer is, as we know, again, he's giving us life on Pesach because he wants to do good. He wants to give good. Well, what good is it if he gives us life, but every single moment of that life, it's all bar korcha chatachai. It's against your will, and you're never given the opportunity to appreciate it. That's counterproductive. The answer so it must be that Pesach gives us the opportunity to allow ourselves to get to that realization that if the Rebbeinu Shalom, whatever the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us, it means that at some point we are guaranteed the opportunity to appreciate it. That's what Pesach means. Which means that when the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us Pesach, which means life, contained in that is the guarantee that eventually we're going to be in a state of menucha to enjoy that life. And that's why Pesach is a yontif where even though it's on the one hand, we don't have chametz, which sort of cuts out a lot of the food options. But as we know, part of the yontif of Pesach, especially the Seder night, Shulchan Aruch is one of the siman. Right? So why is it one of the siman? I understand it's yontif, so you have to have a sudas yontif, but it's one of the siman. Why? Because part of the avodah of Pesach is to enjoy yourself, is to enjoy life. So you sit there like a king, right? Like a ben melech, not like an eved, like a ben melech, like a prince, and you lean and you're served, and everyone takes care of you, hopefully, and everything is, and you're able to appreciate life. Why is that the avodah of Pesach, to appreciate life? This is again because this is the nakuda. The nakuda of Pesach is that the yontif of Pesach is a yontif where the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us a gift, but the chiddush of that gift on Pesach is that instead of just us receiving and saying thank you and backing up 3 steps like a servant, when it comes to Pesach, we're able to receive that gift and think, why would he give that to us? And if we're thinking, why would he give that to us? It must be because he wants us to enjoy that gift. Well, that means that I have the right to demand, and I have the right to expect that I will be given the opportunity to enjoy that gift. So therefore, the 4 cups of wine is a celebration of that gift. But then we have the 5th cup, which says, okay, but I am also guaranteed, and I know it's only a matter of time. It's obvious, because otherwise, why would he give him that gift? But that's the chiddush of Pesach. When it's not Pesach, then I'm an eved, and as an eved, I can't allow myself to think, what does God get out of this? God is who knows? I'm just thankful that I got what I got. But comes Pesach, and Pesach says, no, you're allowed to demand more. And so now all of a sudden, the kosh yo, which is the kosh that's mechazik our faith, that ultimately Chai Menucha is going to come, is if it's flowing from the Yontif of Pesach. It's not a disjointed separate thing. The 4 cups celebrate life, and the 5th cup reminds us of the bitachon that we have, that we're going to be in a state of Menucha with the coming Mashiach as a ben and Basham Loilam and so on. No, it's flowing one from the other. The Yontif of Pesach, the whole Yontif, which is a Yontif that's flowing mitzad the Rebbeinu Shalom, it gives us the right to think in terms of what the Rebbeinu Shalom gains from giving us gifts. When a person gives a gift, so there's always two sides. The receiver is, okay, I take it, but then the receiver to think, why would the giver give it to me? Because he gets something out of this. He wants me to enjoy it. So if I don't enjoy the gift, it's counterproductive. It takes away from his pleasure. So then we're able to demand, and we say Hala Gadol, all in that cup, to bring out this Nakuda, that we're guaranteed the coming of Mashiach. So the Yontiv of Pesach, again, that's the Nakuda. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave us that life of Pesach. It's guaranteed that we're going to have a state of Menucha as well. And this is also why the Yisai that Ratzadik is talking about over here is that this is always a touchy inyan, because on the one hand, everyone grew up with this and everyone knows that, Kachi Darcha Shal Torah, Pas Melch Toichal, I'm Misur Tishta, Lars Tishan, to live a life of deprivation and so on. But yet at the same time, we also know that it depends on the person, obviously, but we also know that when a person lives in that life of deprivation, they're not enjoying life. If you're on a high madregas, then you're complete. You're all your hanos from the ruchnias. But very often, when there's a lack of harchavas hadas, when there's a lack of harchava and gashmias, there's a lack of harchavas hadas and ruchnias too. And that's not what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to ultimately live in a state of menucha and to have an environment that allows there to be an enjoyment of that dvekas that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us by Har Sinai. And to enjoy that dvekas, it means we have to be in a state of menucha. And this is why a person is allowed to daven for Bani Chaim B'Zayim. Like, why do I have the right to daven? Ultimately, why do I have the right to daven that I should have a good life? The whole thing is matana anyway. So why in the world do I have the right to daven that I should have an easy life? For what? The answer is, you're right. Without Pesach, you don't have such a right to make such a request. But from Pesach's perspective, once the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you life, then of course it's ultimately with the goal of you enjoying that gift. So why can't you demand it? Why can't you ask for it? Why can't you be confident that it's going to come? That's Kol. No. So Hashem should help us that all the matanas that the Rebbeinu Shalom has given us, which is Chaim itself, the Rebbeinu Shalom should fulfill the next part of the deal, which is Chaim Menucha and Chai Shalom and Shalva with the coming Mashiach. We is called Tzedek and